Milliseconds can be the difference between a close call and a crash on a motorcycle. How fast can you react? If you do react, will you make the correct decision? Was there anything that you could do to improve your reaction time? Were you distracted or tired, and did that affect your reaction time? Today we'll look at these questions and discuss proven strategies that will help decrease your reaction time and add a few more tools to your riding tool belt. Tip number 1, hack your brain for faster decision making. There are a lot of videos online that show riders riding directly into a hazardous situation, and only at the very last second do they ever react to the hazard. The problem is not that some riders just have a slower reaction time than other riders. The problem is one of road strategy. The best riders don't always have to react to hazards on the road. They often actively predict them and respond to them sooner than having to react to them. By predicting hazards, a rider has a huge advantage over the rider who's late to see problems unfolding in front of them and then having to react to them at the last second. If you ride in a reactionary method, you'll often find hazards that require extreme avoidance maneuvers to avoid, and sometimes the hazard is going to outweigh your ability to avoid it. So how does a rider actively predict hazards? Well, there's a strategy that you can employ called SEE. SEE is an acronym that stands for Search, Evaluate, and Execute. Using the SEE method, a rider is actively searching for hazards, evaluating their impact on the rider, and then executing a plan of response. This is often done before the potential threat ever even exposes itself. So let's use this SEE strategy in an intersection as an example. A rider's approaching an intersection, they search the intersection for hazards. They're looking for things like blind spots, traffic that's stopping, traffic that may not be stopping, vehicles that are turning into the intersection, pedestrians, and a whole host of other things that can impact a rider at an intersection. The rider then evaluates the potential threats. Let's say a car begins making a left-hand turn in front of them in that intersection. A rider should evaluate this as a high-threat situation because that's of extreme importance when a car is turning in front of you. They can then execute a plan. So their plan might include covering the front brakes. They can roll off the throttle. They can actively use the brakes to slow down or stop, all of this depending on the level of threat to the rider. The key is the rider saw the threat before the car was actively blocking their path and had time and space to evaluate the threat and execute a plan of action. SEE can be used in many other situations as well, where a rider is constantly using this technique on the street to search, evaluate, and execute their way around potential hazards. One way you can actively practice SEE is to say out loud the potential hazards that you see out on the road. This will help keep your mind engaged with what's happening around you. Tip number 2, improve your reaction speed. Even after spotting the threat, we still have to react to it. No two riders are going to have the same reaction speed, but we can improve our reaction time that comes from practice and training. First, you make sure you've got the proper technique in place, whether that's emergency braking, swerving, or brake and escape. Your technique and how to perform those skills is key. The best place to get proper technique is in a training class with an instructor watching you and providing tips. Nothing beats immediate feedback from an instructor to help you nail down proper technique. Next, things like the MCrider forums or the field guide can help you practice these on any open parking lot. The forums provide a good place to get feedback if you've got questions on a particular technique. All members of MCrider have access to the forums and the field guide to reinforce proper techniques on a motorcycle. Once the proper technique is in place, it takes repetition to keep those techniques in place and reinforce them into your riding habits. As riders practice and refine their riding skills, not only does their reaction time get better, their technique gets better as well, giving the rider a better chance of avoiding the hazard. Tip number 3, reduce distractions and fatigue. Our reaction time suffers when we're distracted, tired, or mentally checked out. I've been involved in one crash in my riding career, a few training drops, but only one what I would consider a crash out on the street. That crash happened a few years before I became a riding instructor, and in fact, it ultimately led to me becoming an instructor. In my crash, I can attribute the failure to use all 3 of these tips that I'm sharing with you as a direct contributor to my crash. In my crash, a car that was in front of me cut across, slammed on their brakes in front of me, and I locked up the front tire, causing the crash. No ABS on the motorcycle I was riding at that time. So remember our tip number 1, train your brain for faster decisions. Had I been using the C method, I would have been able to see that traffic ahead of the car in front of me was stopped, and I would have been better prepared to stop myself. So when that car in front of me slammed on their brakes, it would have had a little impact on me because I would have already predicted that scenario. Remember, tip number 2 was improving our reaction time. That would have benefited me had I been practicing emergency braking on a parking lot. The last time I had practiced emergency braking was when I passed the basic rider course to get my license. When I needed that skill out on the street, not only was my reaction time off, but the skills I had barely developed in the new rider class were no longer available. Instead of progressively squeezing the front brake, I reached out and grabbed it, causing that tire to lock up, contributing to my crash. And that brings us back to tip number 3, reducing distractions and fatigue. My crash was on my commute home after a stressful day of work. I was tired, and I specifically remember where my mind was right before that crash. I was thinking about everything that I needed to do once I got home, not on what was happening around me in traffic. The failure to put into practice these 3 tips resulted in my crash that totaled my bike, broke my collarbone, my big toe on my right foot, and left a huge bruise and swelling in my right leg, and it was all avoidable. That crash, followed by much more training and practice to develop my road skills and dedication to understand and practice good road strategy, have transformed me into a much better rider today. These 3 tips will not guarantee that you won't be involved in a future crash, but they will drastically improve you as a street rider and will greatly reduce the odds of future incidents for you. Till next week, guys, it's Kevin with MCrider, and I'll see you on the road. There's a whole lot more to MCrider than just the weekly videos. Go to mcrider.com/member. You'll get instant access to the forums and the field guide. You get ad-free MCrider videos and a whole lot more. Go to mcrider.com/member for all the details.